Today we're going to have the sixth and final episode of the webinar series that Argo Safety, Health, and Environment Solutions has been putting on over the course of the last 6 months. Hopefully we can wrap everything up and put everything together, and then we're going to focus on specifically doing behavior observations, one of the key foundations to a healthy and active safety and health program, one that's always improving. So when we started this whole thing 6 months ago, I said that there were basically 5 things that if any safety program would do and work on doing better, that they could improve their performance from a safety standpoint. The first one is making sure that you've got everybody engaged and working with people in leadership and then the people on the front line, helping them to be engaged in safety. We talked about some methods to do that and to survey that. And we talked about proactively and identifying and managing risk. If you'll remember, we had a picture of Pulpit Rock where there's no handrails up there and people have not fallen off according to their websites. Third session was about communication and adopting culture and making sure that culture, not my famous but the famous statement is that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and how important it is, and communication is how we do that. We had a guest speaker for that one. Last month, we spent some time on inspections and how to organize yourself to get out and make sure that conditions are correct. And when we have good conditions for people to work in, they tend to behave better and fewer injuries. And then this last one is the piece that kind of brings it all together in connecting leaders to the front lines and using the observation process to go about and do those things. So we'll go ahead and jump into this. I know that this group on the phone is not a group that likes to do a lot of conversation back and forth, and it's a little weird on a webinar with a bunch of people that you don't know to put your hand up and say something, but I'd like to throw this question out there. And you can either type it in the chat and I'll read it to the group, or you can unmute your mic and jump in and give an answer. But safety and health has been doing observations for well over 20 years now. Started off with Aubrey Daniels and Scott Geller and the behavioral psychologists and others that are doing helping out in health and safety. But somewhere along the way, I think we kind of lost the vision of what is the purpose of an observation. I know at a company that I've been working with lately, we have a card that people have to fill out, and they do the checkbox and they turn it in and it gets scanned and put in a computer system, and it takes them all of about 10 seconds to do an observation. And when I was recently meeting with them, I asked, so what is the purpose of us doing this? And I got crickets. So hopefully I won't get crickets right now. What I'd like is for somebody to be bold and either put their hand up, type something into the to the chat box, or unmute your mic and jump on and answer this question. What is the purpose of doing behavior observations when it comes to health and safety? Any
you guys
thoughts?
hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Derry.
I believe, one of the purposes is for engaging and building trust, or with, in my case, with our subcontractors, right? The field workers. So it's not just kind of checking the box. It would be more like, either coaching those individuals on what needs to be done better, or reinforcing a positive, something positive that they're doing, right? And creating that observation with that. That's kind of my take on that.
Perfect, Derry. Thank you. That's exactly right. And I liked what you started that off with, was establishing and developing the relationships, right? People care more about what you have to say when they know that you care about them and that you understand the work that they're doing. From the chat box, Evelyn says, observations verify that people are doing what the company wants, the way that they want. It may reveal that people don't know, don't agree with, or some other problem. Okay, I think that that's exactly right, Evelyn. It's a chance for leadership to get out in the field and see how things are actually progressing and how things are actually going. Anybody else have any thoughts that they'd like to add? to why we do behavior observations?
We have a couple, Brian.
Okay, go ahead.
If I can add, I know that observations and inspections pretty much, like, we want to catch incidents before they happen, right? Or prevent it before they happen. But it's really a behavior thing where it's not about catching who's doing something unsafe, but like more so when that is your mentality every day you walk into a workplace, the near misses are easily being presented themselves to you. Like, for example, you notice naturally when your behavior is all about safety, like, you know, before it even happens, what can we do? Like, for example, is a rug. You walk into the entrance and the rug is slippery. You stop right there, right? You don't just keep walking to your office. You stop right there. So that's the behavior. Like, I took a minute to realize that something wasn't right. So it's very simple, but at the same time, it has a ripple effect when you continue building on that behavior. And more oftentimes, people who get caught in unsafe behavior or horseplay during, you know, the work, it stems from their behavior. And sometimes they think that, oh, you're gonna get in trouble, but no, you're showing them that you care. If you foster this behavior, you know, these things wouldn't happen, I feel like. Thank you.
It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to go out and observe, reinforce what's going right, and then provide maybe a second set of eyes to see things that people have become accustomed to. John, you got anybody else there that wants to add?
I'll add that when we send consultants out to our member companies, observe, the feedback we get is that it's a good opportunity to set a baseline. You know, what's going on, you know, what's happening well, and, you know, what can we do, or what's happening with what we can do to improve whatever the process is. So it's kind of a good way to establish a baseline, see what's happening, and go from there.
You know, one of the things that I've taught for many, many years on this is that we as people get good at doing our jobs, and our brain, in order to conserve energy and other things, is able to do a lot of processing subconsciously. You ever gotten in a car and driven for half an hour, and when you got to your destination, realize you don't remember anything about the drive at all? I've had that happen to me before, and it's because, you know, I've been driving for, I don't know, a long time, 30 plus years, and there's, you know, my brain can do other things while I'm doing it. Now, I'm not suggesting that multitasking is possible, because it's really not. You can switch task, but things that you do routinely, you get used to, and subconsciously, a lot of that processing takes place. And observations are a good chance for us to bring back to light, elevate that stuff in our consciousness about things that we're just routinely doing. Whether you're doing the work or whether you're doing the observing, it provides us with some help with that. So let me just go on to the next slide. There was another comment from Evelyn that she works for UOSH, and that their office uses observations to observe and verify violations to either cite, or their consultants use them to figure out what the employer needs help with. So spending time out in the field and going out and observing what's going on are excellent. This is an excellent tool to really get a handle on your safety department or your safety performance. Okay, so I was going back through some old stuff yesterday as I was preparing for this, and I came across this slide, or one similar to it, that talked about the 5 different types of conversations that you can have. I think a good observation would use multiple types of these conversations. So let me just review with you what I found, or what I relearned yesterday, about 5 different types of conversations. And of course, an observation is an opportunity for us to have a conversation. The first one is possibility. You know, people who are right there dealing with the problem have a great understanding of how things work and what can fix it. So I just have a note here. Possibility conversations enable people by establishing if the work can be done, if it will work, and if it's worth the effort. You know, 3 things that you ask, and if you go back and you listen to Scott Geller speak, This is part of motivating people and helping people to become empowered and motivated. He shares the same things. If it can be done, if it will work, and is it worth the effort? That's the first one. The second one would be relationship conversations. This is where you establish rapport, you build trust, and you develop foundations for other conversations types. If you only do one observation and you don't go spend more time following up, then you never get that rapport. And a long time ago, when I worked in Kazakhstan, I'd go back to my office in London. And when I'd get in the office in London, people would come up to me and ask me, how is it that you can get the Kazakhs to do all of these things? And without going into a long drawn out story, it was because I would go out and I would spend time with them. And I took time to build a rapport with them. And I knew all of the people that I worked with, I knew what their wives' names were, and I knew what their kids' names were and how old they were. And it wasn't that I was trying to get all into their business and stuff like that, but establishing that rapport. And so the one time that we had a very serious accident where a rock fell out of a back in a coal mine and hit a guy, I was able to go down with the safety manager, with the superintendent, with the plant manager for that particular mine and figure out really what happened. And the people in London were amazed. They're like, these people are more forthcoming with you and they tell you things that they won't tell us when we're there. And I'm like, well, do you just go to your hotel room or do you go spend time with them when you're there? So those relationship conversations are super critical in establishing rapport. And if you really want to find out what's right and what's not working, make sure that you have that good foundation, and it'll allow you to have these other type of conversations with them. Action conversations are really easy ones. They establish who's going to do what by when. Opportunity conversations find out from the people that are closest to the problem if there's a better way to go about accomplishing this. I worked with a company that one of their themes was there's a better way, find it, right? So there's always something that we can do better to make ourselves better. Let's be better tomorrow than we are today. And that was kind of part of their company culture, and that was something that was important to have with them. And then the final type of conversation that we've got when it comes out to going out and doing observations would be the follow-up. That's when we check on the action and we offer assistance or coaching or even feedback, looking at things from an outside. So those are the 5 different types of conversations. Got to think about some of those as you go about doing observations, and how can you incorporate those types of conversations into the discussions that you have. Okay. So we seem like we've got some good folks that are willing to talk with us today on this webinar. I appreciate all of that help. I know that this is another question. I'd like to open up the floor again. You can either put it into the chat or you can unmute yourself and answer. But what do you think are the elements of a good observation, or what does it take to have a really good observation instead of one where it's just kind of the tick off the check mark on the card? What do you guys think? Any thoughts?
We got Quentin here that's got a couple.
Yeah, I'd say what makes a good observation would be consistency as well as knowledge in the industry that you're working.
Sure. Okay.
So knowing all about what your guys are up to out there.
Sure. Does that mean, let me ask you this, Quentin, I'll just push back a little bit and ask, does that mean that somebody who works in the office can't go out on the plant floor and have a good observation because they don't know how to operate the machine?
Not necessarily, but if you know how to operate the machine, I feel like you could better give better feedback or give better resource to the people where the incidents could occur.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, certainly having some expertise about how things work down on the shop floor helps. And I also think, I mean, 2 things can be true at the same time, right? I also think that people with little experience sometimes bring a fresh set of eyes and they see things that may not be seen by people who look at it all of the time. And so provided that we are able to keep people safe, I think sometimes you get both. You get benefits from both. Okay, very good. Thank you, Quentin. Anybody else got any thoughts on what makes a good observation? Kelly Pruitt put in in the chat, being objective, relying on observable facts and behaviors. Yep. You want to be as objective as you can. And certainly if you've got processes that are well defined, then they make a good roadmap to have a conversation. Evelyn says you must be mentally there and not distracted by something else. If it's important to be knowledgeable about the process, or it is important to be knowledgeable, look at the process that you're looking at. Before I answer that question, I want to show you something that I learned a long time ago, and this goes to my thoughts about making a good observation. So let me get to the right slide here. This is something that I didn't invent. Some people that are probably way smarter than me came up with this, but I've grabbed a hold of this and used this many times in my career. This is just a little illustration of the safe path. And, you know, if you were to count each one of these orange little dots and think about it as critical behaviors, that if you start there on the top left at task assignment and you get to the bottom right there at task completion, if you took each one of these steps, if you envision each one of these little orange dots as a critical behavior or something that you must do in order to get to the completion of the task safely without an incident. So what happens is we begin our task and we start down the path, and then eventually we get to this point where it's easier or more convenient. You know, that's one of the paradoxes of safety. Sometimes it's easier to take the shortcut. And thank heavens for us, whenever we go off the safe path and we take a shortcut, that's not a guarantee of an injury or an incident, but it is the opportunity for that to take place, right? And these things that push us off of the safe path are called barriers to safety. One of the purposes of doing a good observation would be to go out there and identify the things that keep people from staying on the safe path. I think in one of the other webinars, I spoke about a packaging operation where we had a machine that filled bags and then put it onto a conveyor belt, and then the conveyor belt took it down to a palletizing machine. And we had a policy and we had a rule that said, if the machine jams before you can go in, you can't just rely on the interlocks on the guarding. You have to actually go lock the machine out to clear the jam. But the place to lock the machine out was on the wall on the opposite side of the conveyor belt. So in order for somebody to lock out the machine, they had to push stop and they had to walk about, I don't know, it was probably 50 feet down the conveyor belt, go around the palletizer, walk back along the wall, throw the disconnect, put their lock on it, then walk back the 50 feet and more 50 more feet, open up the guard, reset the bag, which usually took about 30 seconds or less to do. And then they had to repeat the process in reverse. And you can see that when we went out there and we observed this, the reason that people would take the risk, take that shortcut, and get off the safe path was because it was so much easier just to open up the machine. And by the way, the guards were all interlocked, right? So the machine couldn't work with the guard open, theoretically, even though we know that that's not kosher within the law and that's not the way a good lockout tagout process works. But that's what our operators would do. They would take that because all they had to do was open the guard, stick their hand in the machine, adjust the bag and close it, versus all of the time that it takes to walk around, put on the lock and then do the process in reverse. So yes, sometimes that safe path is more difficult to accomplish, but a barrier would be something that would push you off that safe path or encourage you not to do it. So one of the purposes of a good observation would be to go out and identify those barriers and do what we can to remove it. In this particular case, what we did was we moved the disconnect over near the operator station. Right, so they didn't have to do all of that walking around in order to get it locked out. They could push the stop button, they could throw the disconnect, put their lock on it, then they could fix the problem, and it saved them a bunch more time. Okay, so with that in mind, here are some elements that I've put together over the course of my career, and I've used this in all kinds of places all over the world. I've already mentioned Kazakhstan and Ukraine. I've done this in Canada and Mexico and Argentina and Peru and all over the United States. But I've found that if you follow this little 7-step recipe, you're going to have a good observation when you get done. The first one may not seem to be intuitive. I mean, you know, if I'm the boss and you're the employee, do I have to ask your permission to do anything? Well, not really, and that's not really how our society is set up, but who likes to be treated that way, right? Can anybody in here honestly put their hand up and say, that's how I want to be treated? So yes, the first step in this process is ask for permission. If I were going to observe John there at the Utah Safety Council doing some work, I would ask him, John, I'm out doing some observations today, and I'd like to have your permission to observe you. Well, what if he says no? Well, if he says no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, thanks for your time. I'll come back and observe you another time, right? We all have reasons. We've all had days when things don't seem to be going right, or we're frustrated. And again, we might argue that those are the best days for us to do observations because they may be distracted. But maybe it's a day where they're doing something that really requires a lot of their attention, and having you being an observer would just be an extra distraction. Or maybe there's not a place where you can stand where you won't be right in the way of them doing their work. There's lots of reasons that somebody may not want you to do an observation. And if you're cool about it and you say, okay, I'll come back some other day, then that's fine. Now, if every time I come out and ask John if I can observe him, he tells me no, then I probably need to change my question. And maybe the way I could approach somebody that tells me no would be to say, John, you know, it's really important for me that you go home safely every day. And we're really trying to understand how this work gets done and what we can do to make this a safer place for you to work. So it's important for me to get the opportunity to observe you doing this job. Not in a way to catch you doing anything wrong, but to think about how we can contribute to you being safe. So if you take some time, you establish the rapport, you set up the why behind it, as Simon Sinek says in his Begin with Why book, then we ask for the permission. Can I observe you today? The answer almost always comes back in yes, go ahead and observe me. If they still say no, then the third thing I would do is say, this is such an important this is so important to me and your safety is so important to me. When can I come back to observe you, right? So you notice how we changed the question. So that asking permission is very, very important to begin with. Okay, so once we have the permission from somebody to observe them, the second thing I would ask is, where can I stand? Do you want to stand right next to the person? I'll go ahead and answer that. The answer is no. Most of the time when I'm doing observations, I want to stand someplace out of the way. If you stand right next to the person who's doing the work, a lot of times what happens is you end up visiting for the whole time, and you don't really get an opportunity to see the work. You distract them from doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you yourself don't get to see actually how the work is done. So I always try and say, please point me to a place where I can stand so I'll be safely out of your way, and that I can observe how you go ahead and do this job. And I try to avoid standing right next to somebody while they're doing the work. Third step, observe. And in just a second, on my next slide, I'm going to show you a little video, and we'll see how good of observers you are. Maybe we'll have a little bit of fun with this, see what kind of things that you observe in this video. But observe. And I always tell people that a good observation is probably 15 to 20 minutes. Sometimes it can be a little shorter, sometimes it can be a little longer. Certainly you want to be able to see the process that's going on. I would certainly suggest to you that observing for longer than 5 minutes is important, because for the first 5 minutes, they're going to remember that you're standing there and that you're observing them, and they're going to probably be giving you the show, or at least showing you what they think that you want to see. And honestly, after about 5 minutes, they go on about doing their business. They fall back into their routine, and then there's your chance to see how the work is really getting done. Fourth step, know when to stop. You know, everybody hates it when you're right at that critical point and somebody then interrupts you, right? So be courteous of the person that you're observing. If you've been observing for 20 minutes and they've still got things to do in their work, then don't interrupt them. Wait till they get to kind of a logical stopping point, and pay attention to that, so that you can see when to stop and when to talk with them, so that it's not going to cause them to have to go back and start all over again. Okay. Step number 5, ask for permission to give feedback. You know, feedback is designed to let people know how they're doing. Think about when you learned how to drive your car. You know, I got a lot of feedback from my dad. Usually it was involved swear words and slow down, but or you know, other things like that. But feedback is how we learn. And sometimes we think we're doing the job correctly. Sometimes we think that we've got it right, but there's sometimes can be a blind spot that we can't see, or there's something that we don't completely understand. And so we're going to want to give feedback. But again, we're not dealing with children here. We're dealing with adults, and people have the ability. So if you say, hey, can I give you some feedback about what I've observed? And they say, well, no, not right now. I would say, when would be a good time for me to come and get with you to talk with you about what I see? And the reality is maybe you're close to the end of the shift and they need to clean things up and they really don't have time to hear that feedback. You want to make sure that you deliver it, but then you also want to make sure that it's delivered in a time and a place where it's appropriate for them to hear it. Most of the time it's happening right there. They can stop and you can do this. Okay, so if we go back to the safe path, 6 and 7 relate to that. All safe behaviors. When you're giving feedback, you want to point out, hey, I noticed that you're wearing your appropriate personal protective equipment. I noticed that you set up your work area the right way according to the standard. If you're, you know, maybe if you're talking to somebody who's welding, I noticed that you set up the welding screens around you, and I noticed that you've got the appropriate gloves, or I've noticed all of the good things, all of the safe behaviors that you see. Make sure that you note and respond to and let people know what those safe behaviors are. And then I always limit this to one less safe behavior. Nobody says that they are unsafe. Nobody identifies themselves as being unsafe. So when you say, hey, I want to point out one unsafe thing that you did, you already put people off, right? So our goal is to enroll them and to help them understand the way to do things the safe way and to do things the right way. So I would almost always ask this question: would it be okay with you if I shared with you the one thing that gave me a little bit of concern? And I've never had anybody say no. They're like, yeah, tell me what it is, right? Again, we want to be polite and we want to be enrolling them. You know, nobody wants to have a long bucket list. And the thing about it is, I don't think that one observation is going to change a long list of less safe choices, right? People are still going to do the work the way that they do. So pick the one thing that you could mention and say, you know, it concerns me that I noticed that you're standing right here, and if this machine over here, if this breaks loose, you're standing right in the line of fire. That's gonna take you out, or it's gonna injure you. Is there a better way, or is there something that, you know, reason that you're doing it this way? Is there some way that we can help change this up so that you make it safe? But I always try and limit it to one, maybe two less safe behaviors. Obviously, when you get done, thank them for their time. And then whatever you need to do as far as keeping track of it, whether it's writing it down on a paper and submitting it or putting it in the computer, then those things are all kind of subsequent to that. Okay, in the chat, Evelyn says, even when I was a compliance officer, it was important to me to treat people with respect and politeness. I have observed others who did not. It doesn't go well. It begins it begins an adversarial relationship where people will be unreceptive to any type of help, even if it's in their own best interest. And Evelyn is exactly right on this, right? One observation is not going to change 30 years of poor habits, right? You have to continue. And it's the same thing with my story about working with the folks in Kazakhstan, because I didn't come out there with a long list of how they were screwing everything up. They began to trust me, and I was actually able to work with them on some of those issues that were causing people to get injured. So I appreciated that. So before we go on to this next little exercise, does anybody have any comments or questions that they would like to add? You can either unmute and say them, or you can type them into the chat box. before we move off this slide, this is the recipe for a good observation, if you ask me. Okay, I'm going to show you a little video now. It does have sound, so you may want to turn your sound up a little bit, or maybe you want to turn it down. It's nothing loud or obnoxious, but still. And in this video, the video clip is about 2 minutes long. You're going to just watch a person doing some work. I'd like you to either make mental notes, or you can take out a piece of paper and jot down, list all of the things that you observe in this 2-minute clip of this guy doing some work. Okay, and this will be something that we can all relate to. You don't have to have any special expertise to understand what's going on here. But then when we get done, I'd like to have a little discussion about what is it that you saw? What was it that you saw that was safe? What is it that you saw that was not safe? And if we were going to provide coaching and feedback to this individual, what would you say to them? Okay, so if you're all ready or you're all prepared, here we go. Here comes the video.
Kids, go inside. I'm about to mow the lot.
Caffeine, cigarettes, and a stress sandwich to go. Voice in my head keeps saying, watch out, watch your wish for. Standing over the ocean, later on the month today. 1 foot on the gas, and the other in early gray. It's a long, long, long way down. It's a long, long, long way down.
Okay, so that's something that I think that we can all relate to. Either type it into the chat or unmute yourself and tell me what you saw. What kind of behaviors did you see? Both safe and less safe.
Well, we didn't like that he threw the water bottle. We noticed that he tied the bandana around the auto go.
Flip-flops, open-toe shoes.
Open-toed shoes.
Okay,
You put earplugs in and had gloves though.
And took the kids, you know, tell the kids to go away, so he could, that's a safe thing.
he
The
said he
little
was
ones
in
were
the house.
that, yeah,
Okay, what else did
He
he
had
do?
he had a national something hot rod. Yeah, he had a hot rod association hat on, which means that he's a hot rodder.
Yep,
He
okay,
touched his face after he opened the gas thing with his bare hands and drank his water. That's contamination, whatever, right there.
Yeah.
okay. What else? What else? Did anybody else? Spencer says he tied up the cutout lever or the dead man switch. Okay. Anything else that you guys saw? Anybody else like to jump in and share what they saw?
He didn't clear the area. There were still toys laying around, so that's gonna land in someone's face next door.
Okay. He did put in the hearing protection, right? Hattie said that. Who knows what was in that half-full bottle of water? That's correct. I would hope that it was water, but no. Okay, so there's all kinds of different behaviors that are going on there. The question is that if you were to make a list, would you count that he had more safe or more less safe behaviors? I mean, the statistics, at least the last research that I read, which has been a little while ago, indicate that for every one less safe behavior people do, that there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 safer behaviors that they take. But the challenge when you go to do an observation is that we as people are programmed to find problems. And so if your list was bigger with all of the less safe things that he was doing, that's okay. But when you go out to go on an observation, maybe you should try and reprogram your thinking to find all of the safe things. And that's why in that previous, in the previous slide, I said, make sure that you talk about all of the safe behaviors and then choose one less safe behavior to talk about. Because remember, our goal is to establish rapport and to help people move to that safe path, you know, to remove the barriers to things. So I'll just give you some of my thoughts about things that I saw in that video. He hydrated. Granted, he threw the bottle out in the street when he got done. He did send the kids into the house. He picked up the toys and moved them out of the way. He did a pre-shift inspection on the lawnmower. Now, granted, because of video and how long it takes, you know, we condensed that. But the reality was is he checks the oil, he checks the gas to make sure that it's right. He put on gloves to protect his hands. He put in the hearing protection. He's wearing sunglasses. Now, maybe they weren't the best eye protection, but he's got some protection for his eyes, and he's certainly protecting himself from the UV rays with the sunglasses on. He's wearing a hat to help prevent sunburn and other things like that. So yes, there was a long list of things that he could have done to improve the safety of that. If I were going to conduct that as an observation and make make a recommendation to him, the one thing, or maybe if I gave myself two that I would have changed, was I would have had him release the bandana from the dead man switch. That's designed so that if he lets go of the handle, the mower stops. And I would have probably maybe asked him about wearing at least closed-toed shoes. Because in the United States, a number of people run over their toes every year. The rest of it, I probably wouldn't have spent much time talking about. However, all of the things that he did safe, I would have certainly spent some time talking about. Because if you do it that way, then the next time you come back and observe him doing something else, you've built that rapport, you've established the possibility of how things can be done in a better way, then that would be good. Yep. So Evelyn put in the post that she had noticed that he did two good things and one bad. He put in the hearing protection and he's wearing gloves, so good things for sure, but then wearing the open-toed shoes, right? So those, to me, I think the open-toed shoes and the dead man switch being defeated, probably the most serious things to discuss, and let anything else that, you know, go. But make sure that we compliment him on all of the safe things that he's been doing. Does anybody have any other comments or questions about what we observed? Anybody else like to jump in? Don't be shy. Okay. All right. So we don't need to watch the film again. It's just something fun to think about if you would like. So I guess what I'd like to do is wrap up. We've just got a few minutes left to come back, and again, the 5 things that you can do in order to improve your safety department or improve your safety performance. Get out there and get people engaged. One of the ways you get engagement is by doing observations, by asking people, by engaging in conversations with them. Make sure that you understand your risks, right? I was reading the book 7 Insights into Safety Leadership by Tom Krause and Kristen Bell the other day, and it struck me again that, you know, in our kind of our new safety and health environment where we talk about serious injuries and fatalities or things that have the potential to result in a serious injury or fatality, sometimes we get focused on the number of near misses that we get reported, or things like that. When the research indicates that, you know, only 20% of all of the injuries and near misses combined really lead us to something that has the potential for a serious injury or fatality. And according to Krause and Bell in their book, you know, good safety performance starts with focusing on prevention of those things. So think about the risk and the maximum worst outcome that can happen, and what we need to do to be making sure that those things that have the maximum worst outcome of a serious injury or a fatality, we've got a good handle on those. Communicating in culture, communicating in communication meetings or in observations when we're having that, developing those skills that come along with good communication, doing inspections, doing our part as the company to remove those physical barriers to safety, like when I shared with you about moving that disconnect on that particular lockout, or in other locations, or finding things that are not right and fixing them. You know, it's always hard, and you ruin your own credibility when you come out and you ask people to be safe, to wear their seat belts, to wear their personal protective equipment the right way, and yet you expect them to work in a place that the handrail's been broken for the last 6 months and you haven't fixed it, right? That credibility and those inspections go a long way to developing that great culture. And then using observations is a great tool to find out what's going on, to develop rapport, using those 5 different types of conversations to identify and fix issues. So with that, that kind of ends the presentation. I'm certainly willing to open the floor if anybody's got any questions or comments about the 5 things that we've done, or the recommendations. I will say that if you use your phone to go to any of these QR codes, the top one will take you to a web page where it says sign up for more free webinars. I probably should have changed that because this was the last webinar in this series. But if you actually use that, or you go to that web page there, in a couple of days, I will edit the video for this and publish it up there with the others. There are a total of 6 up there that you can go look at, that walks you through the whole series of things, of the webinars. I've saved those and certainly want to make them available to companies and to people as resources, at least what we think about that. Obviously, I do this as a profession, and anybody who can either refer people to me or invite me to come and work with you to help improve your safety department, you can get information about that at my webpage. And then, of course, because I just am a guy that likes to have fun, if you just want to hear a duck quack, go to the one in the bottom left. It'll take you to a webpage where you can hear a duck quack, because duck quacks are one of the funniest things in the world, if you ask me. So with that, again, I appreciate any referrals to Argo and of companies that could use my help when it comes to improving their safety departments. And I appreciate that. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. Appreciate all of your time today. Hope you have a great rest of your week.